Sounds like a film I've just been watching. The blue ones and the red ones.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. You know, it almost feels like it was only 3 days ago we were together. Was it, Britisher?
Oh, never. That couldn't possibly be. It wouldn't be that you would have broadcast the last episode that late. You wouldn't do that.
No, I clearly wouldn't do that. And anyone who imagines or remembers it that way, clearly lying. As you can tell, I'm joined, as usual, by my good friend, the Britisher. So welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. No guests this evening, as far as I can tell. I didn't invite anyone. So it's just the two of us, but hopefully a chilled, enjoyable
just
stream.
The two of us, romantic candlelight.
Just the two
glass of wine,
us.
Yes.
Let me see if I can just pull up one more. I'll pull up the Streamlabs page so I can get all the donations in should they come to light, and hopefully we shall be all set. I know it's terribly bad of me to be 6 minutes late starting the stream, but what can you do? And we've already had Scowen coming in saying, "You're late. I predict it will be by 9 to 17 seconds, but I'm asleep." I marvel at your ability to manage to super chat various content creators whilst asleep. So thank you for that, Scowen.
I was never aware that the Vikings, when they came across the North Sea in their dragon boats, that they actually worked to a timetable and always arrived on the beach with their raiding parties. On the minute.
So, very, very good timekeepers, the Danes.
Apparently, yes. So it would appear.
Let me see what we've got here.
I'm assuming that they were the ones that actually invented the cuckoo clocks and then just let the people in the Schwarzwald build them under license.
Well, they can't have invented the grandfather clock because they never let anyone live long enough to be grandfathers.
There is that, yes.
Let me see what we've got. Oh, Matt Whitaker. Unfortunately, I can't give you any money this time, lads. Still on sick pay and lost my little finger on my right hand. I'm really sorry to hear that you've been delimbed. But of course, any donations.
Well, now that sounds very suspicious.
It does. But any
lost one's little finger on one's right hand. For anybody who has watched the film with Michael Douglas, Black Rain. The moment you hear of someone having lost their little finger, you get very, very suspicious.
I'll have to add it to my list, unfortunately.
Well, I will put you out of your misery because I know how likely you are ever to follow up on any of my film recommendations. And that is, Michael Douglas is in Japan at that particular time.
Go on.
And he gets embroiled with the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia. And of course, in these kind of Far East Asian societies, loss of face and whatever is a big thing and whatever. And
yes.
Particularly with the Japanese, honor is everything, even among, the criminal class, if you know what I mean. And one of the means by which they can effectively do penitence if they are found to have done wrong by the code of the Yakuza is, for example, to cut one of their fingers off.
Oh, God.
So, obviously, if you would have the choice of what fingers you cut off, you would start with the little ones, right?
Mm.
So, therefore, that apparently is one of the signs, if you know what I mean. Not only are they all very, very heavily tattooed, but one of the signs of, Yakuza gangsters is also that they might have a pinky missing.
I see.
So, of course, that is alluded to in the film and whatever. There is a famous scene in which one of them actually cuts his finger off, and I remember seeing some interview. I don't know if it was the director or whatever who said, "Oh, they got lots of complaints. How could we possibly do this? It was so bloodthirsty. People actually chopping their fingers off."
Yeah.
And he sort of said, "Well, if you actually look at the cut, the only thing you see is the face of the man who's cutting his own finger off. You never see anything. It's all left to the imagination."
Oh, that's the worst place. The imagination is where Satan lives.
Precisely. You leave it to the imagination, and then people come out of the cinema and convince themselves that what you have just shown them is some bloodthirsty gore. And then they start writing letters.
Before your rather, in fact, this I'll tell you what this reminds me of in a second. I do just want to clarify to Matt Whitaker. Whilst donations are gratefully received, you have absolutely no obligation to send any money in, and I appreciate the sentiment. But this anecdote reminds me of a Mel Gibson film of all things, Ransom. Have you seen that one?
I don't think I've seen Ransom. No.
This is I think it's something in the region of 10. He's a criminal, and he is double crossed by his partner for some ridiculously small sum of money in terms of criminal enterprise, $20,000 or something. And he's shot and left for dead. And then the rest of the film is him basically dismantling the entirety of the criminal enterprise and going on his own little rampage in order to get back his 20,000. And that's all he wants is his 20,000, but no one will give it to him. So
it's his revenge, and he wants effectively the money that was put on his head.
Yeah, so he ends up basically getting to the top crime bosses of the organization and saying something, and they're incredulous. They're like, "No man would do this for only $20,000." But there's a scene in that film. There's a scene in that film where he is caught by the badder guys, if you will. And they sit him down in a warehouse, and they get out a club hammer, and they break each of his toes. But in a very similar method, it sounds pleasant. It's left to the imagination,
precisely.
But it is wince-inducing. It's very good. Oh, the film is Payback. Okay, that's my bad.
Okay, when it comes to a film in which someone goes out of their way to get their money, that is, of course, also the film Midnight Run.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Go on.
It's Robert De Niro as the bounty hunter, trying to get what's he called? I always forget this guy's name. I think it's Charles Grodin. I think mainly he actually worked as a director rather than an actor, but once in a while he turns up and does some acting. And he was kind of the bookkeeper of the mafia or something like that. The accountant of the mafia.
Something in Chicago, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he needs to get him. I think he needs to pick him up in New York, which he does without much trouble, and then get him to California.
Yeah.
And it just basically it's a kind of road movie, which in a strange way becomes a kind of buddy movie, even though the two of them hate each other, if you know what I mean.
Sort of about, yeah.
And it's all about his trying to get the reward for this chap.
Yeah.
And of course the mafia are after him, because once they realise, the chap who will be used as a witness against us in court is on the move, okay, money doesn't matter, just kill him.
Yeah.
And at the same time, also, the FBI are also after him because they want to be the ones who bring him in rather than some bounty hunter.
Yeah.
So everybody is trying to snatch this chap off Robert De Niro. And it's also one of those films with just, the swearing by Robert De Niro is just incessant. It's just fantastic.
If I remember correctly, he lets him go at the end.
He does, yes. If we want to do the spoiler, yes, he does let him go. He does let him go in the end, if only just to basically rub everyone up the wrong way. Basically, it's almost as if he realizes that, okay, this guy is actually not that bad, and I hate everyone much more.
It's too much trouble. This is true.
But by that time, he has actually helped lead to the arrest of the mafia boss, and now it's just a matter of wanting to get the what do you call the people who actually is a bail broker or something like that? I don't know. He basically wants to get his own back on that chap and have the satisfaction of knowing that he will go bust.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, that is then the magic moment when the Charles Grodin character produces the money belt from under his clothes, isn't it?
Yes, that he's been hiding for the entirety of the film.
Yes, yes. That's aside from the fact that at one point he tries to take off in a plane he's piloting himself, despite at the beginning pretending to have a panic attack because he can't possibly be flown in a passenger jet.
Yeah. He's scared of planes.
So yes, it is an enjoyable film, people out there. In this case, it appears to be one that I don't have to convince my interlocutor to watch, because for once he's actually watched a movie.
Well, you're assuming, of course, that I didn't just pull up the Wikipedia article and read off the plot. Yes. The chat informs me it's a bondsman, a bail bondsman that you're thinking.
Okay,
of.
yeah, that's the word. Yep. As for Black Rain, by the way, very good film, well worth watching. The friend of the Michael Douglas character is played by Andy Garcia. If that rings a bell with anybody,
chirping insects. There's a little bit of tumbleweed, but I'm sure others are familiar. So Scowen wants to clarify that yes, Britisher, it's raid o'clock.
Raid o'clock. Oh yes, that's quite good actually. I like that, raid o'clock. Yes,
we'll take that. I was
but not raid a grandfather clock.
No, or
as we've established earlier,
grandfather o'raid instead of raid o'clock. So
yeah, they were Irish in that way, weren't they?
Well, unless they accepted aid from the British, in which case they were stripped and it was just grandfather raid.
No, wasn't Andy Garcia in The Godfather? Possibly in Godfather 2, I'm not sure.
Much to my chagrin, I still have yet to see The Godfather.
Well, okay, yeah, he was definitely in Accidental Hero. Perhaps the chat can tell us whether they liked that particular film, because I found that one was absolutely wonderful. And it's one of those films that not many people have heard of if you ever sort of talk about films with folks and whatever. It's with Dustin Hoffman as the kind of, well, how should we say, sort of not all too lovable loser who just happens to be the actual hero of the story.
Interesting.
And
yeah.
So it's a fantastic one. It really is a beautiful little tale, but it was one of those kind of B movies, done on a low budget. And I think that one could have had the potential of being much bigger, just simply because the story is so beautiful.
Mm. I'm reminded Dustin Hoffman. The film that stands out most to me from his repertoire is actually one which most people will have either forgotten him in or wished he hadn't taken part in, which is Sphere, which is an adaptation of a Michael Crichton novel.
Yeah.
Which and I believe Samuel L. Jackson also stars in. And it's set at the bottom of the ocean in an ocean complex, and it features many sci-fi elements. It's good fun, but I'd read the book and I adored the book. It was I really enjoyed that, and then I went to watch the film, and ever since the first film I really watched with Dustin Hoffman in was Sphere, and now whenever anyone mentions Dustin Hoffman, I call back to this film that he wished he hadn't taken part in.
I think when it comes to Dustin Hoffman, we have to differentiate between the films which he takes on in which he actually wants to do a bit of acting, and the films he takes on because they're blockbusters and they deliver a big paycheck.
Yeah.
And I think in Sphere, that was more the latter.
Yeah, entirely probable.
When it comes to something like Accidental Hero, I would say it's the former. Yes, and it, as I say, it's a beautiful film. There's a plane crash on which there is a high-profile journalist, television personality journalist, and the plane crashes, catches fire, and who's the poor sod whose car has really just broken down close to the plane crash at the time? Dustin Hoffman. So he's the guy who wades out in the mud of this, plowed field, if you know what I mean, to try and open the door.
Yeah.
He manages to open the door with great trouble. Folks then manage to get out, but the plane is on fire and there are people trapped inside.
Yeah.
So he's the guy who is, crawling on all fours around, in a smoke-filled, burning plane, trying to get these people out. But he is then also the one, I think, who kind of gets knocked out by the explosion when the plane does go up. By the time he's out again. So obviously the journalist then builds this whole thing up to, the great savior of flight, 901 or whatever the number was. And the cameraman
it wasn't MH17, was it?
the cameraman by pure chance, sort of in one shot, catches the silhouette of him in the blast. And that immediately becomes kind of the logo, if you know what I mean, that they're constantly presenting. And then, of course, out goes the call. We are willing to give anybody $1 million or whatever who can lead to this man, or, even the man himself. What they don't know is he lost his shoe in the mud. So by the time he managed to get to hitchhike and be picked up by some guy who helps disabled people and whatever, he only has one shoe on. And the chap convinces him, well, why don't you just give me that one shoe? It's no use to you. You need a pair. And I know a few one-legged people. So, of course, what happens is they do find the shoe in the mud. And who then is Cinderella and has the other shoe? It's the Andy Garcia character.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, of course, the real hero is this kind of how can you call it? He's a sort of low-level criminal, and he's a real toe rag. It's the only way you can put it. But it just kind of proves the point that it's the toe rag who actually does the heroic act. And the Andy Garcia character, who helps the disabled, and he knows how to be the hero for the cameras.
Yeah.
He is not actually the heroic person.
No.
And therefore you've got this kind of juxtaposition of the person everybody despises, who is actually the real hero.
Yeah.
And the one who inspires people, who talks to a child in a coma, because obviously once they think he's the hero, they build him up and whatever. So he gets to, tour hospitals and whatever. And he talks to a child in a coma, and the kid comes out of the coma the next day and things like that. So he is kind of seen as the ultimate, the ultimate hero, the kind of Superman character. Except, of course, he was not the one who saved the people from the plane. And then it's quite obvious that sooner or later the paths of those two characters are going to intersect again.
Yeah, and it's going to be...
Once the Dustin Hoffman character is back out of prison for credit card fraud.
Right. I was worried that over the course of the weekend there wouldn't be, given that we streamed on Friday, was it? That we wouldn't have much material to deal with over the weekend when it comes to fake accents.
Well, I mean, it's not as if anything happened.
No, only 3 enormous stories that I can think of off the top of my head. We've obviously, across the pond, we've got this impeachment of Donald Trump, which seems to be going ahead. Over here, we've got John Bercow being investigated for collusion alongside of a number of other mid to high level Remainers. And we've also got Boris being Me Too'd, by the looks of things, from 20 years ago, or whatever it was. And people in chat, Sora Sapiens reminding me that Dustin Hoffman played Captain Hook in Hook as well, just going back to our film thing.
Actually, Dustin Hoffman didn't play Captain Hook.
Dustin Hoffman was Hook.
No. Dustin Hoffman played Terry Thomas playing Captain Hook.
Right.
And I would think he would quite openly admit to that. But it wasn't, he was clearly playing. He was playing a version of Terry Thomas playing Captain Hook.
I see.
It was delightful. It was very funny. But he wasn't actually straight up playing Captain Hook. It was being Dustin Hoffman. He once again needed to make it a bit more complicated.
I see we are joined by Discordia. Welcome.
Hello. I was just enjoying British's story.
It's good. It is full of stories, is the Britisher.
Yes.
I often
the problem tends to be shutting me up.
As many know, the Britisher sits in his off hours on my bookshelf, and so on occasion I'll take him down in his little brain case, his little jar, and stick him on the gramophone, because if you spin him slowly, he just recites anecdotes until he's blue in.
Well, there is that. Yes.
It's like the first audiobook.
A 20-year-old Britisher became the first audiobook. I like that.
But you see, actually, there is one film that I've just watched that I won't talk about in any great detail because I don't want to give it all away, because I did decide, even though it's not the next one I've got lined up, but I definitely want to do a film review about it.
Okay.
And this is going to be the first film I'll do a film review on. It won't be the last one, but it will be the first one I'll do a film review on that isn't actually in the English language.
Oh.
And you actually need to watch in subtitles.
Is it Sallow?
No. No, definitely not. No. But this particular film, it's so standout. It's a fantastic film. And I've loved it over the years. I just watched it again. And it's beautiful, but it's a film made in Nazi Germany.
Is it The Shoe of Manitou?
Manitou. You're talking Winnetou here, are you?
With The Shoe of Winnetou. And never mind. That's an obscure reference. Go on.
Yeah. No, it's actually a film from Nazi Germany, and it's one of those things where it would be very difficult, if you hadn't kind of just watched it on the off chance sometime and got to see it and sort of thought, wow, this is a bloody good film, you would never actually go out of your way to, watch a film made in Nazi Germany. You wouldn't assume that it would be anything worthwhile. Now, the beauty about this film is there isn't even any reference to Germany in it. It's completely propaganda free. But for some reason, somehow they managed to produce this absolutely unlikely gem at that particular time.
I mean, I find it strange that you would describe, as Dominic says, unreleased footage of Inside Auschwitz in this way, Britisher.
Yes, what can I say? There are always ways of misinterpreting what I'm saying. Yes.
Well, we'll look forward to that one. Let's start with Burko, I think, today. So, it says here, if I just pop things up in display capture, let's make that visible for people. Hopefully. No, not the display capture. Is it the window capture? Marvellous. There we go. So, it says here, this is from the Mail. It says, Number 10 probes Remain MP's foreign collusion, in quotes, amid plot to allow John Bercow to send surrender letter, in quotes, to Brussels asking for a delay to Brexit. So, Downing Street's launched a major investigation into alleged links between foreign governments and the MPs behind the so-called Surrender Act, which could force Boris Johnson to delay Brexit. Sources said they took the action after officials revealed intelligence that MPs, including Oliver Letwin, former cabinet minister, had received help drafting the bill from members of the French government and the European Union. And the Mail also learns that the rebel MPs have drawn up plans for a second act, which would allow Commons Speaker John Bercow to bypass the Prime Minister if he can't strike a deal to leave by October 31st, allowing him to ask for further delay on part of the Commons. Has this come across your desk at all, Britisher?
It has. Several of these things have kind of come across my desk. One always has to be careful with some of these things as to how how credible they are. I think we have seen some sort of collusion going on, but I'm not sure whether it is really of the kind of tangible kind, if you know what I mean, of foreign governments helping them draft things. This would mean that the French government knows more about British constitutional law than people in Parliament. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So with things like that, I'm a bit doubtful. But when it comes to the Lib Dems writing open letters to Jean-Claude Juncker, when it comes to there isn't even any denial of that there was definitely contact between EU officials and the leading lights in Parliament who drafted the Ben bill.
Right.
And at the same time, again, we have word. How we exactly are supposed to substantiate that, we don't know, but it is said that Tony Blair is pretty much blitzing around Europe, particularly to Paris, and advising them on what the next moves of the British government might be. When you think,
I had heard that.
When you look at things like that, you cannot help but, because let's face it, would anybody really put it past Blair?
No.
Not at all, no.
And that's when you look at it and you just go, there is a strong element of betrayal going on here. Because whether you agree with something or not, I mean, it's like saying we go to war with another country and I don't agree with that war. Oh, well, fine, so I'll just help the other side. Do you understand what I mean? That's not what we do. So even if you may be against the war, you still want your side to win.
Yeah.
And in this case, we have decided to take a certain course of action, and you have got people of certain influence clearly doing everything they can to undermine the government. And I don't think this is a case of which political persuasion you are or whatever. This is just not right. But I'm not sure that there is anything one can do about it in law. As in, these people just ought to know this isn't right, but I can't really see how one would have any legal comeback against them.
The thing that, as chat's highlighted, which I was going to mention, is Farage has mentioned that due to the nature of how the Ben Act came about and beyond, there's a suggestion that under EU law, Article 50 would take precedence over anything they've already created anyway. So it's one of those things where it could be a failed attempt. I think that's what it's going to be contingent upon. The October is now here. It is upon us tomorrow, as far as I'm aware. Yeah, tomorrow. So we're going to have to. Things are accelerating.
Well, that could be their plan B, couldn't it? They'll change the calendar.
We have moved from the Gregorian calendar.
They'll have a vote in Parliament, and as of that vote, it will now be the 3rd of January.
September is now officially 368 days long, and we still wait till the 31st of October. It's a long way off now. That's what it is. Yeah. So even though they're dragging us in with the with Burko being he's being investigated, I think that this is also a move by Boris, obviously, to make things very uncomfortable for MPs who still Remainers. It's this idea that you're going to be scrutinised. If he can find an excuse to get rid of you, he will. He obviously managed to get rid of the defectors quite well, even if it has left him with a minority government.
Yes, but that's only because he has some power over them. When it comes to people like the Speaker or whatever, he has got absolutely no power over him.
Exactly.
And I really don't think there is anything he can do. He could cause a stink, and he could say, our investigation has shown this. But that's all he could do.
I think the only thing he can do is block the idea that the Speaker would be able to supersede the Prime Minister's authority to write the letter to...
He can't block that. Parliament could authorise that, and what does he want to do about it?
I'm trying to see a way out of it, you know what I'm saying?
Yep, no, I do understand, but there is no way he can block anything, because Parliament can effectively make anything happen by Act of Parliament. And we have now seen that they are sufficiently maliciously minded to do such things.
Well, this is why they don't want an election at the moment.
Well, I mean, at the moment, they've even voted not to close Parliament for the Conservative Party conference. Now,
yes, just specifically just for the...
That is in spite.
Yeah, it's like, it's specifically for the Tories, yeah. Let me see what I've got here. So, like, there's just this set of incendiary developments coming in, right? So, Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab vowed in an interview with the Daily Mail to thwart the shoddy and ramshackle surrender bill. Boris Johnson arrives at the Tory party conference in Manchester with his girlfriend, whilst the Scottish nationalists were calling in Westminster for a no-confidence vote. Police investigated complaints about Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage stating we'll take the knife to civil servants after Brexit. Oh yeah, this has been the other thing in the week. They've been he was slamming Boris and associates, shall we call them, for using bad language. And one of my favourite things that came out of this, if I again find this image, unfortunately I can't share it with you just at the moment, Britisher, but basically what I'm showing is an image on Twitter, which is basically one of the politicians who said it's highly offensive and inflammatory to use the word surrender, and they're standing there with their activists, with Caroline Lucas, saying "fuck Boris" on loads of their posters.
Yeah, precisely.
It's divisive to say surrender, but fuck Boris.
Yeah.
It's not divisive at all. No.
Yesterday I touched upon this. If I would have had more time, I would have included other stuff. So one thing I would have loved to include would have been at the prorogation.
Yeah.
When they all walked out. And you had the opposition MPs shouting, "Shame on you! Shame! Shame! Shame on you!" Oh well, that's not divisive at all. That hasn't got the possibility to stir up trouble in any way, shape, or form. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just remarkable how one-sided they see it, but also the media are willing to present it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen absolutely nothing condemning MPs for their hypocrisy over, them attacking Boris. Again, you wonder if it falls into the British tradition almost, like, obviously the media is stacked against Boris anyway. But again, it's seen as kind of the opposition are not in power, but Britain's...
I would say the broadcast media is stacked against Boris.
Yeah.
When it comes to print media, the Tories are pretty well served.
Yeah, it's fine. When I said the media, I meant the broadcast. But it's more the British tradition of you can pretty much say what you like about the people who are currently in office. In fact, we'll go so far. It was what happened with the milkshakings, around that sort of time.
Yeah.
When it was looking at sort of the British tradition or the traditions of things that got thrown at politicians.
It's interesting, isn't it, that one can talk about acid and Nigel Farage, but then if Nigel Farage talks about the civil service, then suddenly he gets investigated by Gwent police. Yes.
Yeah, indeed. Not much else. Farage saying we'll take the knife to civil servants. Let me see if I can find that one, because I saw something about it, but I haven't got the exact.
That one really is remarkable, because that clearly just is
a figure of
speech. Phrase.
A figure of speech.
There's just no way. And the thing was that Gwent police, who investigated this, so they didn't just bat it away and just go get a life. Oh no, no. investigate this. So for several hours, the BBC would actually, in their own, in their headline, had police probe or something like that, and then eventually they changed it. But yeah, Gwen Police investigated, but Gwen Police had complaints.
Yeah.
So plural complaints. So it wasn't just one paranoid public servant or other person complaining on behalf of public servants who complained, saying, "Oh, they want to disembowel public servants." No, at least 2 took this literally.
Perhaps as many as 7. Yes.
It's just sort of, this is just unreal. And yeah, I just think one of the problems we have is that the police have, I think, greatly lost their discretion of being able to just, have a desk sergeant that looks at a complaint and just goes, "Oh, get lost."
Yeah. Well, of course, they're overstretched, Britisher, and unable to.
Yes, but they've got time to. They've got time to
examine whatever they happen to want to examine.
Expression by Nigel Farage,
Yes.
and you'll think this is ridiculous.
Nigel Farage, a man known for his calm demeanour, his mild manner, and non-inflammatory metaphors.
Well, I mean, who knows? Perhaps he's going to be in coalition in the next government, and they're going to appoint him Surgeon General.
Farage added at his speech, he said, "I suggest we listen to the bosses of the ports of Calais and Dover, who report they are 100% ready for Brexit in whatever form it comes, and not the overpaid pen pushers in Whitehall who are not doing a neutral job, and once Brexit's done, will take the knife to them." It's clearly a figure of speech. It's clearly a rhetoric thing. Like the very concept that in this day and age, it's just like, yeah, we're going to start stabbing civil servants. It's actually much less efficient than cutting their jobs to just murder as many civil servants as possible.
Yep. Perfectly credible as far as all of us.
I mean, at what point does austerity cuts become hate speech? Because it's just a phrase.
Well, we're pretty close.
We use the phrase "cuts," therefore it must be violence. It's just there's this thing. I went to a lecture this morning, which was discussing whether or not research into neuroeducation was appropriate. And they keep using this word "appropriate," which keeps cropping up everywhere, and it's not the word that I want used. It's going, I don't care if it's appropriate, I want to know if it's accurate. And so what is accurate about this phrase is that it is a figure of speech, and you can go sod off, and just... You're in fear of your life. Can you imagine how many what I want to know is how many civil servants next week take time off for anxiety and stress caused by the comments of Nigel Farage? Then we get this quantifiable number of how many people there are who made the complaint, and then how many people realise they can jump on the bandwagon. And, the kind of person who is sitting there in an office somewhere purely to tell people that unless they have the correct paperwork, you're not allowed your marriage license. But, it's just ridiculous. Within hours, Gwent Police issued a statement saying, "We are aware of the heightened tensions that exist regarding use of language and take all allegations and concerns from members of the public very seriously." You'd think it would be a point of pride from the police to say that, that they would stand behind sort of free speech and that sort of thing. It should be something where they have the wherewithal to say, look, we are the ones who determine what is and what isn't a credible threat, and we should have much higher standards for what we consider to be a credible threat. I think perhaps as well they're inflamed over the fact that there was it in this country that poor girl had made a 999 call and she was murdered, but the operator basically didn't distinguish her as being serious over the phone or something to that extent. And so perhaps...
Well, yes, but I mean, a politician standing at a lectern...
Yeah, so...
how credible is that? I mean,
Nigel.
there will always be misunderstandings, and you can never rule out misunderstandings.
Nigel Mosley, as he's known to his personal friends.
I mean, what was that famous misunderstanding in the Korean War, where the British were coming under heavy assault at their point of the line by just masses of waves and waves of Chinese soldiers, and they basically, the commander got a phone call from the Americans further down the line, and they didn't have any problems at all, and they were just aware that there was that there was something going on with the British, and were wondering, do they need reinforcements? So the American commander called the British commander and said, is everything all right? And the British replied as in, well, things are getting a bit sticky around here.
Mm.
And the American interpreted that to mean, oh, well, obviously they can completely cope. And eventually the Brits ran out of ammunition and were reduced to throwing corned beef cans out of their trenches to make the Chinese scarper thinking that they were grenades.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So no, the British situation got quite desperate. But all the while, yes, it was all down to the fact that the American commander further down the line had interpreted, oh, things are getting a bit sticky around here.
Yes.
As in, oh, it must be okay, because if he needed help, he would have said so.
When it were actually being overrun, yeah. Oh, communications breakdowns. Farage even did clarify in a tweet, which is
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage. There's a song actually called Farage, which anyway.
Sounds like some highfalutin perfume that's just been launched, doesn't it?
Eau de Farage.
Eau de Nigel Farage.
The Farage said, "I should have said take the axe," which is a more traditional term for cuts, but I just like that. That's even more brutal.
That might just have sounded as if Scowen was about to arrive.
Yes, but when I imagine it, I don't imagine the sort of traditional woodsman's axe. I'm imagining like a great chipped battle axe that's going to take it through. Yes. So a couple of super chats have come in. Let's see what we've got here. Ratface donates $2, says, "Look up Nosy Bonk. You Brits have weird TV shows." Let me just... Good grief. Okay. Let me pop this up here. I will link in stream chat in the server. Hopefully things go through so you can see that. That is a terrifying character, I do have to agree. But then the Brits are known for that. There's something about Rosie and Jim that's deeply unsettling as well, I have to say. So
I'm glad that I don't even know who you're talking about.
Yeah, same. It's horrendous. Jigsaw or something along those lines. Okay. So, well, thanks for that, Raface, for that aside. What do we have here? So... Mighty Balzac said Britisher and NSO should do a stream this Christmas on the Star Wars Holiday Special. I have not actually watched the Star Wars Holiday Special. Yourself, Britisher?
There is such a thing as a Star Wars Holiday Special.
So we're told. Apparently it is dire. So that should be fun. Although the concept of us doing a commentary stream on something might be fun. Maybe we'll try and work something out off air if you're interested in that sort of thing, British.
Well, the problem is, how do we do a commentary stream on anything without just basically ripping the copyright of whatever this thing is we're commenting on to shreds?
So what you do is we watch the film, but we only record our response, and then people who want to watch alongside boot up the film themselves and put both on concurrently. I believe that's what Mauler does, and he does that quite often. So there is that option. It's like you basically just record a commentary track.
I
that's
see.
The way that works.
I've learned something.
There we go. Tim Cornish donated $10. Thank you very much, sir. And says, a 20-year-old Britisher spread the plague through his use of his Rodentia minions long before the Great Attack Hamster Rebellion of 2019. Thank you very much, Tim. Much appreciated.
Given my experience of the last few weeks, I don't think I need minions to spread the plague.
Just yourself, and you need someone to. You need to be your patient zero, right? But you're immobile, effectively. You're locked up on your sofa. So unless people are coming to your house, coming and going, you have to be like the Pied Piper. You play your flute, and the rodents come, and then you use them to spread your horrible disease.
Well, I see you've thought this through.
Only in the last
considerably more thought into this than I have.
Only in the last 5 seconds or so.
Well, so you say.
Well, I mean, you have to remember I was there. So,
well, of course, yes.
Ian Inkster donates £5. Says, by nature, justice is liberalism, services is socialism, institutions are conservatism, or else each is degenerate.
Sorry, what's that? Can you give me that one again?
So let's break it down. By nature, justice is liberalism, services are socialism, institutions are conservatism, or else each is degenerate. You know, if they go away from that. I presume he's talking about the departure of the police from their ability to tell people to sod off. For spurious reporting, as it were. So, I don't know whether or not I agree that justice is liberalism.
That was already the first stumbling block.
It depends how you define liberalism as opposed to libertinism, I suppose. Services as socialism. It depends if they're seized.
Again, it depends where you draw the line between a service and an institution.
And also the fact that also the idea that because government services, whether or not they are taking away from private enterprise in doing so, in the manner of, for instance, the Labour Party deciding to ramp their attack up against private schools, where they would
don't get me started,
where they would literally take them over. Seize their assets and repurpose them for their own means. That's socialism. But I think a government option for something is not necessarily socialism.
To be honest, I'm not even sure whether just seizing it and repurposing it for your own means is necessarily socialism.
What? I mean, it's seizing the means of private property.
Yes, yeah, but I mean. Dare I mention the Romans?
Go ahead.
In the prescriptions, so basically both Sulla and then Mark Antony and Octavian. So basically there was 2 great waves of prescriptions. One got rid of all one's political enemies, and one seized all their property. And the one thing that made Julius Caesar so stand out is that he didn't do that. But basically, he was forgiving towards his enemies, who then all stabbed him, but he also didn't take their property off them or anything.
So you're saying in times of war, unless you're Julius Caesar, if you seize people's assets, it's not socialism.
It wasn't even war. But basically, Sulla had won. He took over Rome. War was over, and now he decided, okay, I want these people dead. And he literally just published a list and said, here are the names of people I want dead. And people would get a reward for killing them, and then he and his cronies would simply help themselves to the property. And the same thing happened again with Mark Antony and Octavian, which is why recently, who's the Yorkshire chap? The Yorkshire gent who's reading Gibbons at the moment. He kind of said that, Augustus was a hero of mine. And I said, not really. No, he's a bit of a bastard. And this is obviously one of the reasons. I mean, that's how Cicero died. He was killed in the prescriptions because he was an enemy of Mark Antony's.
So it's less that in today's context, you're saying that services are social. Seizing assets as socialism. You're saying it's provably that in history, it's not always been the case.
Well, yes, that it's been, I would assume it's been a considerably more frequent occurrence than we assume, that the powerful have just helped themselves towards property. this also kind of ties into this thing whereby I always like to say the left is much older than socialism. And this is one of the things that people always tend to forget. And I think particularly the socialists themselves always like to kind of portray the image that, without us, the working classes wouldn't have any voice at all. Only socialism can provide the answer. And that's when you kind of hear the dogma and you can hear the doctrine, if you know what I mean. But it kind of shows that they, for example, forget that where does the term left and right come from? It's 17th century French, due to where they sat in their assembly.
Well, I feel. No, go on.
And the left, obviously, those were the reformists. Those were the people. Those were the ones talking on behalf of the people and so ever. But nobody would ever say that in the 18th century socialism had been invented.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that.
And again, you can go far back as the Roman Republic, and you will see that is what they call the conflict of the orders, the people against the nobles, and at a later date you get the tribunes of the people, and you get the populares and the optimates and whatever. And yes, you effectively have the equivalent of a left and a right, but no socialist in sight and no red flag.
Well, I feel thoroughly educated. Thank you very much, Richard. Ian Inkster clearly definitely got his money's worth out of that tweet. I think we'd have to examine that statement in more detail, but I think British has worked out that even our definitions of socialism are not accurate. I've just I was going to go through the super chats, but I've just got a notification through on my phone. So some of you may have been aware that there was a girl who claimed that she's a black girl in America. She claimed that 6 boys held her down and cut her dreadlocks off whilst saying racial slurs, and she's just admitted that she made the whole story up. 12-year-old African-American girl who claimed 3 white classmates pinned her down and cut her dreadlocks has admitted the claims were fabricated. Now that's interesting because she ran a GoFundMe of some description and basically made a load of money off it, and it's all fake. And
this is all nonsense. I'm quite sure that the latest news saying that it was a fabrication is a fabrication on her part, being made under duress.
Evidently, three white journalists held her down and forced that. But no.
One from the Washington Post, one from the New York Times, and the third one was from what?
Well, that would be Owen Jones, of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the street fighter. They brought him to have a bit of muscle. Indeed,
the very muscly. But anyway, back on track. So, Binary Surfer donated £2. Thank you very much, sir. Says, not so obvious. Kill all MPs who block Brexit. Are we going to have to craft our own list? Is Boris going to have to craft a list and say, I want these people dead? And then steal their property.
The prescription lists.
The prescription.
Yeah, no, I would strongly advise against prescription lists.
Did it not work out too well in the long run?
It didn't work out particularly well in Rome, because there was a logical problem with that. The prescription lists only work if you can be absolutely certain to get all of them. Even those you have you haven't put on the list because you didn't know. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Imagine the situation whereby you split it, irrespective of whether it's ancient Rome or not. You basically split the entire political scene in half. One half wear blue rosettes, the other half wear red rosettes, okay? And they effectively represent the population, who are also roughly 50-50.
Okay.
Now, you say, okay, the blue rosettes get the upper hand, and they set about killing off all the red rosettes, but they don't manage to kill all of them. 1 or 2 of them survive. And then, once all the killing is over, and the killing has been declared at an end, and politics returns back to normal, all the blue rosettes are still as many rosettes as ever, And they have to each share a share of those 50% of the population who vote blue rosette. But now the last 2 remaining red rosettes come in, and each one of them commands 25% of the population.
Yeah.
Do you see the problem there?
I see. I do indeed. Oh dear. So, well, I'm educated again, Richard. Thank you ever so much. So, Mr. Twisted Frenzy donates €5. Thank you very much. Says there has to be a way to force a general election out of this farce of a parliament. Any ideas how it could be done? I don't know. Like we went over this both on Unpopular Opinions last week and a little bit on Friday. I'm trying to think how many options we went through, because Boris can't force it himself. I think the only thing that would have been an interesting one would be if the DUP basically went after a vote of no confidence.
Yes, if I may interject,
Go ahead.
There is one way. It looks as if the Scottish nationalists are getting a bit trigger happy.
Yes.
They are the ones who seem to be a bit keener than anybody else in doing something.
I think it's because they know their seats are safe.
Yes, they know their seats are safe, and because the Scottish Ruth Davidson, the Scottish Tory leader, has left, and she's left the Tories in a bit of disarray in Scotland, they are hoping to get those seats.
Yeah.
So not only do they think their seats are safe, they actually think they'll turn out of this quite well. So they would quite like a general election. Now, when it comes to a vote of no confidence, all that is fraught with, we don't have a clue what the turnout of that would be. That's why when they are saying they would like a vote of no confidence, the other parties aren't really very keen on it.
Yeah.
Now, at the moment, the government simply just don't have a majority, so they can't do anything. But there is one possibility when it comes to getting a general election.
Do tell.
And that is, under the current law, in order to get a general election, you need 2/3 of the vote in Parliament.
Yeah.
But, of course, Parliament can change any law, including that one.
So you are suggesting that the only way is to contravene British law and change British law, so that you're no longer
British law and then have a vote that way. Because Parliament is sovereign, and Parliament can decide whatever it wants. So the Tories, if they have a majority of +1,
could do it.
Can force through a general election. Now, if the Scottish nationalists get itchy enough to have a general election, then the SNP and the Tories and the DUP, but I think they wouldn't necessarily even need the DUP, but the DUP, the Tories, and the SNP would be enough to have 50% +1.
Mm.
And that could basically...
the SNP are going to work with the Tories.
Well, yes, but
the SNP...
These are strange times we live in.
The SNP might do it if they see their own gain in it. If they're convinced that the Tories are going to be fractured, or they are going to pull up the Scottish nationalists are not really concerned about anything outside of Scotland. So if they see themselves as hoovering up all the fractured Tory seats in that they have, that they want.
The way I see it is, it's a long shot, but it's the only possibility I can see at the moment of forcing a general election.
People in chat saying that the people are sovereign, not Parliament. We have parliamentary sovereignty in the sense of we defer our sovereignty to Parliament.
But the whole conundrum has simply arisen because Parliament is sovereign. So basically, whether you say it is sovereign or it holds the lease of sovereignty from the people, they are presently sitting, they have several years to run, and they don't see fit to call a general election. So at the moment, it's just complete stalemate. we can't get them out. There is no constitutional way in which we can force them out.
No, not until 2022.
Yeah. So, as such, if they want to, they can sit pretty until then. That's more than likely not possible. That's not practical.
Yeah.
And I think they themselves know that. My assumption is they will somehow try and get it past the end of October, claim that to be some great victory in which they have saved the nation, and then try and go to an election that way. But if before then you wish to somehow force an election, you wish to somehow envisage a way by which to force an election, more than likely the SNP breaking away from this kind of alliance is more than likely the only way. Because if you just try and overthrow the government, if you try and have a vote of no confidence, it can go either way. It can end up with the opposition not being able to form a government, or it can end up with them actually forming a government and then running the place.
Yeah, be a risky.
With a very small majority, but a lot of spite.
Yeah. And you have to remember as well when it comes to the SNP and the Tories, as it is mentioned, Laconic mentions this in chat actually, that it doesn't matter too much to them if Brexit happens, because it gives them another reason to, call for independence again. And they've got enough devolved powers. And
do you want to hear something really surprising about the SNP that many people of your vintage will not know?
Surprise me.
In my own lifetime, the SNP were once upon a time known as the Tartan Tories.
Huh.
Yes, they were actually seen as being on the right, on the political right.
Seeing as at the moment,
the place they've actually ended up in is entirely down to political manoeuvring.
Yeah, I mean, they're grapefruits at the moment, yellow on the outside, red on the inside. So it's an interesting.
But yeah, I mean, I think quite a few sort of people of younger vintage will be quite surprised at that, because now folks see them as left wing, if not even more left wing than Labour.
Well, I didn't,
because they actually outflanked Labour on the left.
Yeah. Well, as I say,
they came from the right.
I didn't know anything really about the SNP pre Indie Ref,
Yeah.
So I'm going to move us on now, though. So Ian Inkster again donates £5. Thank you very much. Says a state should be liberal in its architecture, socialist in its plumbing, and conservative in its furniture.
Interesting. I'm trying to see what's being insinuated here. So what is? Why socialist in one's plumbing?
That's the main. That's the only bit.
Socialist. I would assume socialism isn't particularly good at plumbing.
No, all that comes to mind is Romania, which is where you had to wait 4 years to get a car. And you were assigned one, and you had to collect it in a specific hour of a specific day. And if you didn't, you went to the back of the list again. So
I went to someone else.
I mean, uniform in its plumbing. I quite like the idea of that. Where you don't have to have a different, much like phone chargers. You don't want a new one with every model, every house with a different set of tools required in order to service it. But
then again, I mean, Romanian plumbing might in some strange way even be utterly outstanding.
I doubt it.
Have you ever heard the story of Ceausescu's Palace of the People?
Let's assume I haven't.
Well, I mean, I think it was actually, it more than likely still is, the largest building in Europe.
Okay.
And it effectively was the dictator's palace. But of course, it was sold as the Palace of the People, because I mean, it's communism. How possibly could he have a palace, if you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But his being Ceausescu, and these kind of communist dictators being famed for their high-handedness, he decided that everything in this palace needed to be made in Romania. It needed to be Romanian. And you think, well, sort of on paper, that sounds perfectly fine, until you kind of start thinking through the practicalities of it. And that is, Romania is not a big country.
No.
Now, if the United States of America, a country that size, decides we want to build not just a building, but a palace, and everything has to come from the United States of America, well, that's fine. But if you're a country the size of Romania, do you really need to produce your own taps? Or can you just import them?
I want a quote book that just has little things that you say sometimes in that we can release to the general public. Just
think of it. Do you think that in any sort of normal economy, Romania would be making its own electric plugs?
No, I don't think so.
That's what I'm getting at. Can you understand now why that was seen as a bit of a disaster? Because the Palace of the People in Romania, everything needed to be made in Romania. So the electric wire, the electric plugs, the sockets, the taps, everything needed to come from there. Nothing could be imported, not even from the fellow communist neighbours, if you know what I mean. Well, needed to come from there. So if they wanted tiles in the bathroom, and they usually just brought in tiles from elsewhere, they needed to make a factory to make tiles to supply the palace and then close down again.
Well, I can see now why you've never been described as a Romanian supremacist, Britisher.
So that's why I say there is the off chance that Romania, that perhaps somehow by sheer miracle, the plumbing factory survived that made all the taps and fittings for the palace and is now around, and therefore Romania is famed for its plumbing. Who knows? It could be.
Oh, well, I certainly have.
I doubt it.
I have
but
no
it could
idea.
Be.
There we go. Architect of Fate has donated $10. Thank you very much. Very generous. It says, if using the police has become an acceptable tactic, how many complaints would it take to get the Ramonas investigated for treason, sedition, and violating their oath of office?
It would never work, because they would simply they would then suddenly discover that they have discretion to not investigate things.
That's our police. I mean, using the police is unacceptable. Like, you can bombard the police with these sorts of things.
It doesn't necessarily mean they'll react to them.
Yeah, I don't think, especially if it comes across as a concerted effort from a group of people the police doesn't like very much, because the top brass, as it were, has basically is facilitating a two. What on earth is what's the phrase I'm looking for? Where it's a two-tier system of policing, basically. Yeah.
Which is, why some people complain about the politicisation of the British police.
I think it's
because
more,
they should have the nous to basically just say, this Nigel Farage stuff, we're not going to look into that. Get lost.
The police cucking in the way that they have to these complaints is more evidence of the politicisation of the judiciary, which is also a huge issue. Well,
what we need is more Dixon of Dock Green and more policing along the lines of Sid James in Carry On Constable.
I think it would be more.
Now, you see, if you watched films, you would know what the hell I'm talking about.
I am not a cinephile, and I've revealed this many times. But I think it would be like, going back to the actual question at hand, Britisher.
There was a question?
As how many complaints would it take?
Many eons ago, before I started off on Romanian palaces.
Said that no. It's how many complaints would it take to get the Remainers investigated for treason, sedition, and violating their oath of office? I think it's far more.
If it's a complaint signed by Jean-Claude Juncker, they might act.
I think, Well, I think it's a more plausible thing to do. Would be to start bombarding MPs' offices with complaints, because
no, they would claim them all to be abuse.
No, you've got me there. God damn it. It's like, you are not doing your job. You are not doing your job. You are not doing your job. Oh, we're being harassed by our public. Yes, it's your job to be harassed by people who want you to do things for bloody hell. Anyway. Since Cohen donates $3, says, did someone call for a Danish axe to fell something? And don't fucking watch that abomination called Star Wars Christmas Horror. Thank you very much, Since Cohen. Sorosapien donating £5 through Super Chat. A British obsession is one for murder. We love a good whodunit, Poirot, Marple, Midsummer Murders, Morse, and Sherlock Holmes.
How good are the Danes at rowing? Given that we're under permanent threat from Scowen declaring it raid o'clock.
The Danes aren't good at rowing, but they are very good at whipping people and making them row for them.
No, I'm quite sure that the Danes, as we speak of them, the raid o'clock Danes, they rowed themselves.
Well, but they'll be tired when they get here.
The Olympics and whatever. I mean, do the Danes actually do well at that? At rowing, I mean, wouldn't one think that's a kind of Viking discipline?
I've no idea.
I mean, I know sort of the British and the Germans have traditionally always had very good teams when it comes to the 8-man, when it comes to the sort of 8-man sort of, university boat race style rowing.
I have to admit, I've never paid much attention to the Danish rowing team, Britisher.
Isn't it true, just to rub it in for Scowen,
okay,
that the Danes are absolutely pitiful at the Winter Olympics?
Sure.
Because you would think, given that they're a Scandinavian nation, they should be absolutely outstanding. Because, you look at the Finns and the Norwegians and the Swedes, and they're always winning tons of medals at the Winter Olympics. But I believe, isn't it true that the Danes have only ever won one Winter Olympic medal or something like that? They're sort of the joker in the pack, literally, when it comes to the Winter Olympics.
Well, since going, the gauntlet has been thrown. Feel free to respond as you wish. Mr. Twisted Frenzy donates €2 through Super Chat, says check Streamlabs, and then says through Streamlabs, given how effective Brexit was in bringing many old unresolved issues to the forefront of political discussion and forcing politicians to address them, well, sort of, would you be in favour of making referendums a regular part of British politics? Absolutely not. From my own perspective. I can expand, but Britisher?
Well, certain things you can only deal with by referendum. But I think we've seen that referendums in the context of British political culture are extremely divisive. Largely, I think, just due to the fact that it is a tool that is wielded so rarely. The
only time a referendum is called is if something is too divisive for Parliament anyway.
I'm not sure. Take things like, there have been referenda in this country that were deemed fairly non-controversial, and which, because, let's face it, as far as the middle classes are concerned, the right side won, and therefore everything was okay.
Seems like a spurious referenda, then, surely.
Well, I mean, there was a referendum which the Lib Dems put all their political capital behind. Bloody fools!
Oh yes, the AV.
Yes, and that was the actual vote on the voting system. And you can see why that wouldn't just be regarded as something for Parliament, but why one would actually refer that to the people. As in, this is something substantial regarding the way in which you are governed, and we think you ought to have a say on that. Do you understand what I mean? I think a referendum there is the right way to deal with that.
Fair enough. Architect of Fate has chimed in from the chat to on the behalf of Scowen to say that Denmark rowing 7 gold medals, 5 silver, 12 bronze.
So they are fairly useful then. So the Viking gene lives on.
Well, yes, or they've got nothing better to do. It is a snowy country with nothing but broken electronics, as far as I'm aware.
Well, I mean, this is just it. Once it gets to be a snowy country, apparently they're fairly useless as everything.
There it is. Right, back to the weekend's politics then, if we must. I want to come on to Boris Johnson's Me Too accusation, which again,
I haven't actually heard about this, so you're gonna have to explain it to me.
This is remarkable timing. Remarkable timing. Basically, on the second anniversary of Me Too, Charlotte Edwards, the columnist for the Times, recalls a scandalous encounter she had with the Prime Minister.
Isn't she a just newly appointed columnist for the Times?
Yeah, yesterday, as it happened. No, I have no idea. But basically, she's writing about the late 90s, early 2000s. Basically, she says, I'm a young newspaper reporter. I occasionally contribute to The Spectator, essentially a magazine for old Tories, and so on. No one minds calling these clean-skinned, shiny-eyed girls totty, even to their clean-skinned, shiny-eyed faces, blah, 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 all this usual stuff. Anyway, she goes on to claim that basically Boris touched her thigh under a table during a meeting 20 years ago.
Well, he squeezed her thigh.
He squeezed her thigh and that of another woman at a lunch in 1999.
Well, apparently in 1999 he squeezed her thigh and he was that far up her thigh to make sure she sat up. I think that's how she...
To touch the womanly flesh above, yes.
And afterwards, when she mentioned that to another woman present, she was assured that he'd apparently also done it to her.
Yes.
And this has taken 20 years to remember.
Yes, and not to mention the fact that Boris himself, this hasn't been fact-checked at all. No one has specified which meeting it was. He obviously calls it untrue, but it's nothing. If you can't prove it, and there's been no allegations since, it kind of makes it. As far as I'm aware, Boris is, has come under fire for a lot of things in his eccentricity, but being a thigh handler is not one of them.
Well, yes, but this may be more cleverly targeted than people realise, because obviously he's known as a bit of a rake. He's known as a bit of a ladies' man.
Yeah.
And this basically plays into that, if you know what I mean.
Well, of course, they've then played into the fact that he, his marital trouble and then his girlfriend, but also now a claim that he had an affair with an ex-model whilst he was London mayor has also come out. All these kind of smear pieces.
It's very interesting how all these things are simultaneously. I'll say I wouldn't be surprised if he would suddenly be, found out to be one of the body snatchers or something like that in the run-up to the end of October. It's remarkable. I pointed it out at one point. Wherever Boris Johnson went, there was a heckler.
Yeah.
And there was always somebody there to film it. And you remember it then culminated in that famous incident where you had the Labour Party activist, the former staffer of Emily Thornberry, his father in a hospital.
You're cutting out a little bit for me, Britisher. Can you just say that again?
I think it's you.
Actually, cut out. You just cut out for me there.
Okay.
But I'll gladly repeat it. No problem.
Sure. Cheers.
It turned out to be that it was a staffer of Emily Thornberry's who was haranguing him in a hospital, but of course that was then reported everywhere as a concerned father, giving the Prime Minister a talking to. And this is what I mean, that, I remember, Gordon Brown and also Theresa May, two desperately unpopular Prime Ministers in their day. And funnily enough, this sort of thing didn't happen on a regular basis.
Mm.
And yet, Boris Johnson doesn't seem able to walk through any town centre without there being somebody to tell him he should be in Brussels negotiating.
Yes.
Do you understand what I mean?
But there's also been footage.
Odd.
The other thing is there's plenty of footage as well of people coming up to Boris and saying, thank you, good job, keep up the good work, etc. Which I've seen floating around on Twitter. I don't have a link to it now, but the media narrative on him is obviously erring to the side of the inflammatory activist.
Well, I mean, in fairness to them, if I would be an editor, I wouldn't be showing people shaking hands with the Prime Minister, telling him what a wonderful job he's doing. But it's just so odd that, they should be in short succession.
Yes, just
heckler after heckler after heckler.
And
creating this impression, as in, desperately unpopular, and he's beset by accusations of this and accusations of that.
Oh, the worst thing is
he's the first Prime Minister to be taken to court for proroguing Parliament in 300 years.
So here's another thing. So the story about the affair that he had, aside from the fact that he's free to do in his personal life what he wants to do, however incorrect and disgusting you may find the concept of an affair, it's more he was alleged to have given her £126,000 in public money, right? But that's not what people are focusing on. It's kind of like the personal scandal. But you'd think if there was really any true weight to those accusations, then there would be an investigation into him for that kind of thing. Also, the same day, a Business Insider article of all things came up where it says Boris Johnson could soon become the first sitting Prime Minister in history to lose his seat. So this one's saying, let me see what here. So Ali Milani, the 24-year-old British Muslim who arrived in the country from Iran at age 5, claims that he's going to unseat Boris Johnson at the next general election and force him out of power and be the first person to ever unseat a Prime Minister, despite the fact that no Labour candidate has ever won in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, which is the seat in West London where
that depends.
Boris
how well does he crouch on tables?
Indeed, he's no magic Majid. But this is the other thing. So they highlight the fact that Boris Johnson was elected in 2015 to Uxbridge and South Ruislip despite having no local connection to the area, whereas the Labour candidate believes that because he was raised there, he's a local lad, and he's got a better connection to them, he's going to have it. I mean, I admire his optimism, but it is a very safe seat, and there's a reason that Boris is placed there. That's because it's a very safe seat.
And when you say, well, he had no connection to the area, the connection to the area really is that your local people know you. Now, that is effectively the advantage that you're granted.
Yeah.
Except, of course, that in this case, Boris Johnson was one of the most high-profile Tory, politicians in the country. Therefore, he already had them knowing him, whether he was local or not.
The theory is that because his majority has fallen in across opinion polls, I will mention, from 2015 to 2017. From 10,000 to just over 5,000, that he thinks he has a shot. But that is I don't know what the population is. Let me see what the population of Uxbridge and West Ruislip.
While you're looking that up, talking of populations, we've just gone over 400 people watching on this stream.
Oh, very good, very good.
Which it doesn't seem to be all too bad, does it?
Not at all. So the population of Ruislip as a whole is 31,000 by itself. So so the total between them is around 80,000, and his majority is still 5,000, assuming obviously that population data from the census includes children and that sort of thing as well.
Yes, and also considering that, you have to look at what he has done since he is Prime Minister and whether that actually might have done him some good within his constituency.
As well, given that it is a Tory safe seat.
It's a Tory safe seat. So you would think surely it will play into the, it will play exactly into that sort of thing. So I really can't I can't see Boris Johnson fearing for his seat. However much one would like to paint it that way.
So we've got. There we go. Let's see what we've got here. Sorry, it's just things updating on my Streamlabs page. So Architect of Fate says, I'll donate $5, says, I wonder if there would be some fangirling by Discordia and Sarah if they received a thigh squeeze from the British Boris, Mr. Johnson. What's your thoughts on that, Discordia?
Absolutely. I can imagine Sarah would give a little squeal.
I think she would just need to be in the room for that to happen. She is kind of a squealer. But for yourself,
I would of course do my best Sid James impression.
Thanks for that horrific imagery, the British Shepherd thing.
And Boris would be seen running.
So there you go. If Oozaloo is watching this stream at all, Discordia would be happy to have her thighs squeezed by Boris Johnson. Clearly,
absolutely.
What did I refer to the three of us as on a tweet after that? What was it? It was Academic Agent Aquinas, Sargon Whitehouse of Akkad, and Hugh Britisher.
Hugh Britisher.
Yes.
I like that one. Yes.
Obviously I was the odd one out. What can I say?
Oh, what can you say? You know, what can't you say? Let's face it. Architect of Fate donates $5 and says, I wonder if they... No, we've already said that one. Mr. Twisted Frenzy donates $5, says, do you think the UK would help out Ireland after the EU's collapse? We're too small and tied too close to the hip of the EU to do an Irexit, so it's inevitable we're going down with the ship.
Well, I think when it comes to that economy, it is actually heavily tied to the United Kingdom.
It is. There's certainly a lot of investment that's going on into Ireland at the moment. It's sort of seen as a tax haven of sorts anyway. I mean...
Yes, but a vast amount of their agricultural product comes to us.
Yes.
It's not as if they're really selling beef to Romania, if you know what I mean.
And I think the British people as well are well... I'm trying to search for the word, and I'm losing the word. I was going to say like they were well endowed towards the Irish, but I don't think that's definitely not the right phraseology. They're well inclined towards them. So I don't think there's any question that Britain would attempt to help out its closer neighbours, shall we say.
Well, that's unless Academic Agent takes over the country, and then it will be Potato Famine 2.0. Yes.
What was it Scowen said last week? It's amazing how a country can have a famine when it's surrounded by fish. The Irish, on a serious note, when it comes to helping out Ireland, as far as I'm aware, there's a lot of funding coming in from Britain anyway. In what we already give to the EU comes back through to Ireland, and investing in infrastructure. When I was last in the Republic, certainly the cabbies that I had who drove me around were very encouraged, especially the older ones, by the level of infrastructure. And they said, I've not seen cranes down here in so long. And it's really good to see industry kind of starting to flourish in Ireland. I don't know whether or not that's just their anecdotal experience, but I would hope that we would continue to foster a close relationship with
I remember going to Belfast about 10 years ago. And that was obviously, when they were kind of getting over the troubles. And the amount of building work there was just unbelievable. It was Belfast city centre seemed to be one big building site. Just, I've never seen so many cranes in my life. It was absolutely unreal. So yeah, the peace dividend, I don't know whether it had any significant effect in the Republic of Ireland. I would assume not, because they weren't really affected so much by bombs and whatever. But in the north, it was just extraordinary. When I was sort of speaking to people, they were kind of telling me that until kind of the Good Friday Agreement and whatever, until that came about, they didn't have a single Tesco.
Yeah.
None of the British chains had moved into Northern Ireland because they just felt, well, we're just going to get bombed anyway because we're going to be seen as a symbol of the mainland.
Mm.
So they had completely independent chains, supermarket store chains and things like that, which then got bought by the British mainland chains and changed into, the mainland brands. But prior to that, yes, they didn't even have a Tesco supermarket. It was just remarkable how they were a completely separate little economy.
Yeah.
Until eventually they became more incorporated because the capital of mainland Britain could flow in because one wouldn't immediately fear it would just be blown up.
Yeah.
I mean, don't they have the most bombed hotel in the world? Is it the Hotel Europa?
Are we sure that it is the most bombed, or is it just that we don't have data on the most bombed one because it's constantly being bombed?
But no, I think it has a sort of rather fearsome reputation in that regard, that it was bombed God only knows how many times during the Troubles.
Well, interesting. I need to research more about the Troubles, actually. I know very little.
I have the privilege of twice, to my knowledge, having
bombing your Hotel Europa.
No, but walked past an IRA bomb.
Oh wow! Okay, how did that happen?
Obviously, not knowing at the time.
Was it under your car, or?
Incidentally, when I was visiting there, that is once again I walked past an IRA bomb, not realizing it, and then heard in the news that I'd walked past an IRA bomb.
Reminds me of the IT crowd where they get stuck next to them.
It's an interesting one in that regard. That yes, more than likely I should just never go places.
People tend to plant bombs in your path.
Or perhaps people, if I am really the one who is attracting all these bombs, perhaps people could pay me money just to walk around Westminster over and over.
When people said you were a bombshell magnet, it wasn't quite what you anticipated, right? Finally,
yes, I had this thought of page 3 girls flinging themselves at me, but it wasn't really what it turned out to be.
We've reached the end of the super chats. Architect of Fate says a 20-year-old Britisher gave Aphrodite her girdle. So, is there any truth to that statement, Britisher?
Completely untrue. I mean, do you really think I would have put clothes on her?
There we go. It was clearly some sort of sly, sneaky character who would have done that then.
Maybe they saw you taking it off and got confused.
Yeah, it was a clip played in reverse. That was going on. And but so onto our final story of the evening, which is that Trump is apparently going to be impeached. As far as I'm aware, this is
what does impeached technically mean? Because from what I understand it, impeached means that Congress votes to impeach you. But in order for the process to finish, the Senate then needs to when I say Congress, I mean, the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
But then the Senate needs to effectively join in. And from what I understand, that happened to Bill Clinton. The Republican House of Representatives voted to impeach him, and the and the Senate that was Democrat dominated just shrugged its shoulders and went, "So what?"
I've kind of come into this this whole story at a midpoint. I feel like. Can you just run me through sort of how the whole thing started?
How do you mean?
Like who? I'm aware that there's supposedly a whistleblower, but
there's a whistleblower who seems to be saying that what Donald Trump said to the Ukrainian president was, unbecoming of a president. That effectively he was using his power in order to get some dirt on on Biden,
political
opponent, on Biden. because Biden, as vice president, is supposed to have got rid of the chief prosecutor, or a prosecutor at least. I think it was a chief prosecutor. I might be misremembering. In the Ukraine, Biden claims that was, political because it was such a dirty prosecutor and one wasn't willing to, hand over money to a country that was that corrupt. But what the Trump camp is alleging is that he actually wanted rid of that prosecutor because an investigation was taking place against Biden's son. So that's why Trump apparently, approached the president of Ukraine and said, well, you might want to look into this. They then basically, the Democrats then started demanding, because this whistleblower had come out and said that he thought this was untoward. Oh, we want the transcript. Fine, here's the transcript. Oh, but we want it unredacted. Fine, here it is, unredacted.
Yeah.
We want it immediately. Well, yeah, here it is. And then, you just looked at a text that you just thought, well, I'm sorry, but this is just not a smoking gun. This is just not sufficient. There's no way that this is kind of the mafioso talking, to his victim, saying, you will either do this or,
I'm going to give you an offer you can't refuse, yeah.
Precisely. And they are now trying to say, oh, well, yes, but what you need to do is you need to between the lines. And you could, so what you're saying is that it's actually nothing explicit in this whatsoever.
Yeah. And you could infer whatever the hell you wanted if you're so inclined.
So now they are saying, oh, well, now we need to impeach because this is a step too far. He's, he's corrupt. He's this, he's that. And you just go, well, yes, it's just because you hate him anyway. This has nothing to do with...
Well, there was, what was it? He's come under fire, hasn't he? Because he's now asking to meet the whistleblower. He's saying, "Look, here I am. There's the transcript. Nothing to hide." And
he's also called the whistleblower a traitor. Apparently.
Yeah. Well,
according to the grapevine,
he does have a flair for the dramatic, doesn't he?
Who, Trump?
Yeah. Democrats say the
Donald stiff upper lip Trump? Never. I don't know how you could possibly say such a
thing. So apparently the whistleblower has been endangered by Trump's criticism of him or her.
Of course, just as all the Labour MPs were endangered by Boris Johnson saying humbug. Yes.
And so since the transcript of his call with the president of Ukraine was revealed, Mr. Trump called for the anonymous whistleblower to be unmasked. Democrats say they're going to, the whistleblower is going to testify to Congress soon, as long as the steps are taken to protect their identity. Mr. Trump has suggested his opponents could be arrested for treason. The transcript only showed that Mr. Trump urged, I'm going to mispronounce this, Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate discredited corruption allegations against former Vice President and 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden, as well as his son. The call is now at the centre of an effort by Democrats that could see Mr. Trump expelled from office. I think that's unlikely. But doing so would require members of the Republican Party to turn against him. So,
by the way, Volodymyr Zelensky is the Ukrainian president who is a comedian.
Yes, that was right. Who played the
president in a TV series?
Yes, it was kind of one of those stranger than fiction moments, really. But then again, you're reminded, what did Ronald Reagan do before his term in office as well?
Well, yes, but he didn't actually play.
He didn't play himself. No,
he didn't play himself prior to becoming himself. If you know what I mean.
It's true.
And Ronald Reagan had a career in acting, but then after that, I think already, while he was the actor, he was being asked to do a lot of sort of commercial presentations, for corporations and things like that. And more, he kind of almost became a sort of quasi-political spokesperson.
Mm.
So there was a lot more politics to Ronald Reagan than people really credit him.
Yeah.
Now, sort of looking back, everybody likes to sort of say, "Oh, and then he became a president," and you think, "Well, not really."
Well, in the same way,
a much more drawn-out process in which gradually he became something else.
In the same way that, of all people, Arnold Schwarzenegger becoming governor of California was not sort of a spur-of-the-moment thing either.
But it was much more fast-forward than Ronald Reagan's progression to becoming governor of California.
Yeah. As far as I
mean, Ronald Reagan became governor of California, but as I say, he'd been for a long time a kind of, a figurehead for corporations and things like that, and somebody they could use to lobby, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And then eventually he becomes governor of California, but he becomes a revolutionary governor of California. So he becomes someone who seriously changes the way the government of California works. And then on the back of that, he then becomes president.
I see what you're saying. So as far as I can tell, there is absolutely no wind in the sails of this impeachment thing then, as much as they're making a big noise about it.
Yes, I mean it would be as embarrassing to Trump of being impeached in the House of Representatives, the way I understand it, as it was to Bill Clinton, but it wouldn't get past the Senate. Effectively, not having the vote in both houses. How is this supposed to happen?
Yeah, I also love that
it will only strengthen Trump's hands in basically furthering his narrative that they will do everything to stop him.
I also like the fact that they appear to hate Trump so much that they're willing to accept Mike Pence as the interim president of the United States should Trump be impeached and removed from office.
Well, who knows? Perhaps they've already got a fast-forward impeachment lined up for him once he comes to power. No, it just seems outright ludicrous. I mean, Trump has come out in a series of tweets. I heard there were 14 of them, in which he's basically said, "Look, they're only doing this because I'm actually doing well in the polls," which the latter seems to be the case. He is doing better in the polls. And it looks to me as if he is an absolute certainty for re-election. I can't see any of the people who are presently standing there among the Democrat candidates. I mean, Biden is now even beginning to lose. I mean, his...
Well, it's a miracle that Biden was winning anyway.
But what I mean is Elizabeth Warren looks now to be becoming the front runner of the Democrat.
Please let her. Please let her, because it would be so funny.
She's just a running joke. That is.
You imagine if Trump turns up to the first debate that they have together, if it's Warren, and he's just hands her a DNA test, and he's just like, "I'm more Native American than you are." It's just, that would be such an amazing troll just from the start, and it's only going to endear him to his fan base. Because, of course, that was what he was threatening at the time when she was claiming it, NZ Slappy says, Trump does need to explain why he sent his personal lawyer to Ukraine. If it was state business, it should have been B-Bar, not Giuliani. As I say, if he needs to explain it, he needs to explain it. But everything about this seems spurious at the moment. If it turns into something more substantiated, then by all means. But on the basis of the evidence,
lawyer sent to Ukraine is not going to convict him of anything.
No, and on the basis of sort of the evidence presented at the moment, which is effectively hearsay from someone who wishes to remain anonymous. Nothing really. Yes. Do you have anything else that we'd like to say on the Trump impeachment case, or is that about it?
As far as I don't know that much about impeachment procedures or whatever, but it looks like a fairly it may well go through the House of Representatives. I don't know whether they need a set majority, or if it's just 50% plus one, which, they have got the majority in the House, so they could do it if all of them fall in line. But they wouldn't be able to get it past the Senate. But as such, yes, you just look at it and you go, this is a bit of a non-story.
If it develops further in the week, we'll have an American on next week, and that'll throw some spanners in there.
You look at it and you just go, how on earth do you sell this to the public? The kind of hardened Democrats will all totally believe that it's a sign of corruption. The hardened Republicans will all say this is complete and utter humbug. It's all in order to bring the patron saint of the Republicans down. And meanwhile, the people in the middle who tend to decide, elections, what will they think? And I'm sorry, when you come towards the people in the centre and you present them something like this in order to bring down a president, they will just look at it and just go, I'm sorry, but this is nothing.
As Striking Hand says in the chat, a big fat nothing burger. So yes, I think that's accurate. Well, on that note, I think we've rounded out the stories for the evening, and it is about time to end. But thank you very much for joining me, Discordia.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you very much for joining me, Britisher. I will just read the last super chat that's come in from Architect of Fate, which says, impeachment is just an investigation. They need 2/3 of the Senate in order to remove Trump from office. So thanks for clarifying that, Architect of Fate.
Okay.
Yes. And there you go, Britisher. You've been educated this evening.
I've been completely wrong with all the waffle I've presented. I just it just triggered a memory there when you read out Architect of Fate, because earlier you had a super chat I think it was a super chat at least, when someone said, the architects need to be liberal. That's before we went off on
architecture
plumbing.
Architecture should be liberal, and
I still don't understand why architects should be liberal.
Well, as in people should be able to create whatever they wish with their property, presumably.
I find that a very confusing statement, whoever it was.
Perhaps you should make a video on it, or engage with this person in private conversation and be like, "Explain yourself, sir."
Explain yourself, sir. How dare you? How very dare you?
How very dare indeed.
I hope you were proud of me, by the way, of finding this minuscule microphone button just before when I was having a coughing fit.
I'm very proud of you, Britisher. You're learning. So, and on the note that the Britisher is still maintains enough neuroplasticity to learn things, it is time to end. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. And final goodbye from me. And we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.